My name is Gary and I want to tell you a story that changed my life forever. What happened still seems incredible to me, but every word is true. 12 years of marriage with Valerie. 12 years that I thought were happy. I worked as a manager at a construction company in Chicago. She was a nurse at the local hospital. An ordinary American family, ordinary life. Or at least that's what I thought. That day started like always. Valerie went to take a shower after work, and I decided to forward a link from her phone to mine. Nothing special, just an article about renovation that she had shown me in the morning. I opened her purse, looking for her phone, and suddenly my hand bumped into something unusual. A condom. A single condom in a small box. My heart started beating faster. Valerie and I hadn't used condoms for about 5 years. She was on the pill. Why would she need one condom? Maybe she bought it for me as a surprise? But then why just one and not a whole pack? That's when an idea hit me. Now I understand how stupid and dangerous it was, but then I was acting under the influence of emotions. I remembered seeing on TV that red pepper is added to tear gas. When it gets in the eyes, nose, or mouth, it causes tearing and burning, but after washing with water, people are fine. Besides, if I miscalculated something with the pepper, Valerie as a nurse would be able to provide first aid. I took a syringe from our home first aid kit, mixed water with red pepper, and carefully injected a drop of the mixture into the condom package. If it was meant for me, I'd just throw it away and take another one. And if not, maybe I'd soon find out who the lover was. But that's not all I did that day. I also sent myself a message on Telegram with my wife's geolocation, and deleted the message from her phone. Now I could track where she was. Days passed. A week. Everything was calm. Valerie drove her usual route to work and home. I was already starting to think it was paranoia on my part. Maybe the condom really was for me? Maybe I was wrong? But something kept me from throwing away that condom. Suspicion wouldn't leave me alone. I started paying more attention to little things. Valerie started staying late at work more often. Extra shifts, she explained. But somehow her salary wasn't increasing. One time when she was staying late again, I decided to go to the hospital and pick her up. I told the security guard I was there for my wife. He checked the lists and said there was no Valerie there. Her shift had ended 3 hours ago. My heart started beating faster. Where had she been for those 3 hours? The next week something strange happened. Valerie suddenly started talking about her colleague Mike, how clever he was, how he helped with difficult patients. She had never talked about colleagues in such detail before. Then I noticed she started hiding her phone. Previously she could leave it anywhere, now she always kept it with her. She even took it to the bathroom. Work calls can come at any moment, she explained. But the strangest thing was different. One evening when I came home early, I found Valerie at the computer. She quickly closed the browser window and said she was looking at recipes. But I managed to notice a hotel logo on the screen. I'm planning a surprise for your birthday, she smiled. My birthday was 5 months away. All these little things were adding up to one picture, but I still hoped I was wrong. So I decided to play it smart. I started keeping a diary of her activities. Monday, came home 2 hours late, claimed there was an emergency. Tuesday, phone rang at 11 p.m., she went to another room to answer. Wednesday, found a restaurant receipt in her coat pocket for 2 people, but she said she ate alone. The evidence was mounting, but I needed something concrete. That's when I remembered an old friend from college, Danny, who worked in private investigation. I called him not to gather evidence for divorce, I already had enough suspicion for that, but to find out something specific. Did Mike have a wife? Turned out he did. Susan worked in accounting at the local school district. Married for 5 years, 2 children, Emma, 8, and little Jake, 5. I felt sick thinking about those kids. How many families was this affair going to destroy? But I had a plan. Instead of confronting the cheaters directly, I decided to let the truth reveal itself naturally. I wrote Susan an anonymous letter. Not about the affair, just advice to pay attention to your husband's behavior lately. Sometimes wives notice everything themselves, they just need a push. The letter was simple. Dear Susan, I'm a friend who cares about your family. I think you should pay closer attention to Mike's recent behavior. Sometimes the signs are there, we just choose not to see them. A concerned friend. I mailed it on a Tuesday. By Friday the effect was visible. Valerie came home upset. Mike's having problems at home, she said. His wife is suspicious about something, making scenes. I nodded sympathetically, but inside I was smiling. The plan was working. The next week Valerie seemed on edge. She was jumpier when her phone rang, more secretive about her whereabouts. I could see the stress of maintaining the lie was getting to her. Maybe Mike should talk to his wife honestly, I suggested one evening. Clear the air. Valerie looked at me sharply. What do you mean? Well, if she's suspicious without reason, honesty usually helps, I said innocently. Unless there's something to hide. She didn't answer, just said she was tired and went to bed early. The following week, Valerie announced she was going to visit her sister in Atlanta for the weekend. She's going through a divorce, needs support. But Valerie's sister lived in Boston, and she had always remembered that correctly before. I knew then it was time to act, but I wanted to give them one more chance to reveal themselves. That's nice of you to support family, I said. Which hotel are you staying at? In case of emergency. She hesitated. I'm staying at her place. Oh, she moved back from Boston? Another hesitation. Yes, recently. I called Valerie's sister that evening. She was surprised to hear from me and confused when I asked about her move to Atlanta. Atlanta? Gary, I've lived in Boston for 10 years. Is Valerie okay? She seemed stressed last time we talked. The next morning, I told Valerie I was going to the mountains for the weekend. I often did this, loved solitude and nature. My wife never showed much interest in my hiking trips. In 12 years of marriage, she never even looked at photos from my journeys. Actually, I drove to a hotel 20 miles from home and waited. I didn't have to wait long. At 11:30 at night, Valerie's geolocation suddenly moved from our house to the local hospital. At first I thought maybe a call to work? But she wasn't on call that night. I got in my car and drove there. What I saw near the hospital completely destroyed my world. Valerie was standing by a car with her colleague Mike, whom she'd worked with for 3 years. He was holding his groin and writhing in pain while my wife was trying to calm him down. I walked up to them. Mike, seeing me, first got scared, then angry. It's just red pepper, I told him calmly. Nothing serious. Wash it with water and everything will pass. He didn't know how to react. He felt pain, anger, and fear at the same time. After all, I had discovered the betrayal and he had a wife too. By the way, I added, looking at Valerie, that condom was my property bought with my money. We have a joint account after all. Nobody asked you to share it. Now the geolocation explained everything. Why hadn't I seen suspicious movements before? They were meeting at her workplace. Clever but not clever enough. Valerie was crying. Mike was trying to explain something. But I didn't care about their explanations anymore. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play. Mike, I said, I think you should call Susan. Tell her where you are right now. His face went white. You don't understand? I understand perfectly. I also sent a little note to your wife last week. About paying attention to behavior changes. Seems like she took my advice. Valerie looked confused. What note? Gary, what's going on? What's going on, dear wife, is that your 12-year marriage is over. And Mike's 5-year marriage probably is too. I pulled out my phone. Should I call Susan myself? Let her know where to find her husband at midnight. Please, Mike said. My kids? Your kids deserve a father who doesn't lie to their mother, I replied. Just like I deserved a wife who wouldn't cheat. The next day I found a lawyer. But before filing for divorce, I decided to make one last check. I went to our bank and reviewed our joint account statements for the past 6 months. There was payments to a hotel downtown, restaurant charges for 2 people on days when Valerie claimed to be working late, even a payment to a lingerie store that I had never seen any purchases from. The financial evidence was damning. Our joint money funding her affair. I made copies of everything. Then I did something that felt both cruel and necessary. I opened a new bank account and transferred exactly half of our joint savings. If she wanted to live a double life, she could fund it herself. But I also had another plan forming. Something that would make the consequences of her choices crystal clear. I spent the next week gathering more evidence. Not for court, Michigan is a no-fault divorce state, but for my own peace of mind. I hired Danny after all, not to catch them in the act, but to document the full scope of the deception. The report he gave me was devastating. The affair had been going on for 8 months. They met at the hospital, at hotels, at her friend from work, Sarah's apartment. Except Sarah didn't exist. That was just their code name for their meeting place. There were photos, times, dates. A complete timeline of betrayal. But the most shocking discovery was that they had been planning to leave their spouses. Danny had overheard a conversation where they discussed, after the divorces. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together. That changed everything for me. This wasn't just cheating, it was premeditated destruction of 2 families. I decided they needed to understand the full consequences of their choices. First, I contacted a family lawyer who specialized in custody cases. I wanted to understand what would happen to Mike's children if the affair came to light in his divorce proceedings. The news wasn't good for Mike. Infidelity, especially with financial implications using family money for the affair, could significantly impact custody arrangements. His children might have limited time with their father. Next, I researched the hospital's policy on employee relationships. It turned out there were strict guidelines about disclosure and potential conflicts of interest. Both Mike and Valerie could face professional consequences. Armed with this information, I crafted my final plan. I wrote 3 letters. The first was to Susan, Mike's wife. This time not anonymous. I introduced myself, explained the situation completely, and provided copies of all the evidence Danny had gathered. I also included information about the legal and financial resources available to her. The second was to the hospital administration. A formal complaint about undisclosed personal relationships between employees that could affect patient care and workplace dynamics. The third was to Valerie herself. But I didn't give it to her yet. Instead, I waited. 2 weeks after the confrontation at the hospital, Valerie announced she was going to visit her sister in Atlanta, again for the weekend. This time I was ready. I followed her, staying far enough back not to be seen. She drove to a hotel on the outskirts of Chicago, the same one that appeared on our bank statements. I parked across the street and waited. At 3 p.m. Mike arrived. I gave them an hour. Then I walked into the hotel lobby. "Excuse me," I said to the desk clerk, "I'm supposed to meet my wife here." "Valerie Thompson, room?" The clerk checked the system. "Room 237, sir." "Perfect." I had the room number. But I didn't go up. Instead, I went back to my car and made 3 phone calls. The first was to Susan. "They're together right now. Hotel Meridian, room 237. If you want to see for yourself." The second was to the hospital's patient advocacy hotline. "I need to report a potential conflict of interest involving 2 employees who are having an undisclosed relationship that could affect patient care." The third was to a process server. "I need divorce papers delivered to room 237 at Hotel Meridian in exactly 2 hours." Then I waited. Susan arrived first, 40 minutes later. I watched her park and walk into the hotel with determination I had never seen before. A few minutes later, I heard shouting from the second floor. The process server arrived exactly on schedule. I watched him enter the hotel. By the time I drove home, it was over. Valerie's phone had been buzzing nonstop, but I had turned off location sharing and blocked her number. The most daring part was how I decided to divorce in a non-traditional way. Instead of scandals and confrontations, I simply disappeared from her life. I moved to another apartment in Detroit suburbs, changed my phone number, even my job, found a position at a company that dealt with commercial real estate. When she came home after that night at the hospital, I was no longer there. Only the divorce papers on the kitchen table and a note. "I know everything. The condom, the late work hours, the hotel, the sister in Atlanta. Don't look for me." I also left all our shared photos, but on each one where we were together, I carefully covered my face with a white sticker. Symbolically, I was erasing myself from our story. I had packed my suitcase in advance and left it in the trunk of my car. When I left the house for the last time, I took only the essentials. I left the keys in the mailbox. But there was one more thing I did. I left a video message on our home computer, set to play automatically when turned on. The video was simple. Me sitting in our living room, speaking calmly to the camera. "Valerie, if you're watching this, it means you've come home to an empty house. You're probably confused, maybe scared. Let me clear things up for you. I know about Mike. I've known for weeks. The condom in your purse was a test, a stupid, dangerous test that I should never have done. But it led me to the truth. I know about the hotel charges on our joint account. I know about the fake overtime shifts. I know about your fictional sister in Atlanta. I know that you've been planning to leave me after you got your affairs in order. So I'm saving you the trouble. I'm leaving first. You'll find that our joint account has been split. My half is gone along with me. Your half is still there, along with all the bills you'll now have to pay alone. Mike's wife knows everything too. I made sure of that. His children will grow up knowing their father chose another woman over their family. The hospital administration has been informed about your relationship. I don't know what consequences that will have for your career, but that's your problem now. You made your choices, Valerie. Every secret meeting, every lie, every time you used our money to fund your betrayal, those were your choices. Now you get to live with them. I won't be back. Don't look for me. Don't call me. Don't ask our friends where I am. This is goodbye. 12 years of marriage and this is how it ends. Not with love, not with fighting, but with you coming home to an empty house and a computer screen. I hope Mike was worth it. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Valerie tried to find me through mutual friends, but I had warned them that I wanted no contact. Mike also divorced his wife. Susan had indeed noticed the changes in his behavior after my anonymous letter. But the consequences extended far beyond just our divorces. Mike lost primary custody of his children. The court found that his infidelity and deception made him an unreliable parent. He gets them every other weekend now instead of the shared custody he had expected. Both Mike and Valerie faced professional review at the hospital. While they weren't fired, they were transferred to different departments and put on probation. Their colleagues knew why, which made their work environment uncomfortable. Susan got the house, the majority of assets, and child support. She also got something else, the support of the community. People rallied around her and the children. Meanwhile, Mike and Valerie found that their affair, exposed and brought into daylight, wasn't as exciting as it had been in secret. The thrill was gone, replaced by the reality of what their choices had cost. I heard through the grapevine that they tried to make it work for a few months. But guilt, professional consequences, and the complicated reality of blended families with hurt children proved too much. They broke up 6 months after the divorces were final. Valerie eventually tried to reach out to me through a mutual friend. She wanted to apologize, to explain, to try to make amends. The friend told me she seemed genuinely remorseful, that she realized what she had thrown away. But some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some trust, once broken, can't be repaired. I declined the meeting. I started over in Detroit. New job, new apartment, new life. I even started dating again, a kindergarten teacher named Rebecca who had never been married and brought no drama to the relationship. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how I handled it. If I think I was too harsh, too calculated, too cold. I don't regret it. Valerie made a choice to deceive me for 8 months. She made a choice to use our shared money to fund her betrayal. She made a choice to plan a future with another man while still married to me. I simply made a choice to ensure she faced the full consequences of those decisions. Some people call it revenge. I call it justice. The pepper in the condom? That was stupid and dangerous, and I truly regret it. But everything else, the investigation, the exposure, the way I left, that was just revealing the truth she had worked so hard to hide. She wanted to live a double life. I made sure she could only live one. In the end, that's all any of us can do, live with the consequences of our choices. Valerie chose betrayal. Mike chose to destroy his family. Susan chose to fight for her children. I chose to walk away with my dignity intact. A year later, I got a letter from Susan. She wanted to thank me for telling her the truth even though it was painful. Her children were doing better, she had a new job with better pay, and she had started dating a widowed father from her daughter's school. Sometimes, she wrote, the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best thing that could happen. Thank you for giving me the chance to rebuild my life on a foundation of truth instead of lies. That letter meant more to me than any apology from Valerie ever could have. Because the truth is, we both got what we needed. She got her freedom to be with Mike. I got my freedom from her deception. Sometimes the end of a marriage isn't a failure. Sometimes it's a liberation. Sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. And sometimes the person who cheats loses far more than the person who was betrayed. I know which one I'd rather be. But the story doesn't end there. Life has a way of adding unexpected chapters even when you think the book is closed. 2 years after the divorce, I was living comfortably in Detroit. My new relationship with Rebecca was going well, we had moved in together and were talking about marriage. My job in commercial real estate was thriving, and I had built a completely new social circle. Then one day, Danny called me with news I wasn't expecting. Gary, you need to know something. Mike contacted me. He's looking for you. My blood ran cold. What does he want? He wouldn't say exactly, but he seemed desperate. Mentioned something about making amends and having information you need to know. I told Danny I wasn't interested. I had moved on, built a new life, and had no desire to revisit the past. But Danny persisted. Look, I know you don't want to deal with this, but he seemed genuinely distressed. Said it was about Valerie and that you deserve to know the truth. I already know the truth, I replied. They had an affair. They destroyed 2 families. End of story. But curiosity is a powerful thing. Despite myself, I found myself wondering what Mike could possibly have to tell me that I didn't already know. A week later, I made a decision I thought I'd never make. I agreed to meet Mike at a neutral location, a coffee shop in a town halfway between Detroit and Chicago. He looked terrible. The confident, healthy man I had confronted at the hospital 2 years ago was gone. In his place sat someone who looked like he had aged a decade. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and there were deep circles under his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat down across from him. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. You have 10 minutes. He took a deep breath. "Gary, I need to tell you something about Valerie. Something I should have told you 2 years ago." I felt my jaw clench. "I don't want to hear about your relationship with my ex-wife. It's not about our relationship. It's about why she cheated in the first place." Despite myself, I leaned forward slightly. This wasn't what I had expected. Mike continued, his voice shaking. "Valerie told me things about your marriage. Things that made me understand why she was vulnerable to having an affair." "What kind of things?" "She said you had become distant over the past few years. That you barely talked to her anymore except about practical matters. That you spent all your free time hiking or working, and she felt like she was living with a roommate instead of a husband." I felt a familiar anger rising. "So she decided to cheat instead of talking to me about it?" "No, that's not the point I'm trying to make." Mike rubbed his face with his hands. "The point is, she also told me that she had been trying to get pregnant for 3 years. The world seemed to stop." "What?" "She stopped taking birth control pills 3 years ago, Gary. She wanted to have children with you. But she never told you because she was afraid you'd say you weren't ready." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "That's impossible. She was on the pill." "She told me she was on the pill." "She lied. She wanted a baby so badly and she thought if it just happened naturally, you'd be happy about it. But months went by, then years, and nothing happened. She started to think maybe it was a sign that your marriage wasn't meant to last." I stared at Mike, processing this information. All those years, while I thought we were being careful about not having children until we were ready, she had been hoping to get pregnant. All those years of her asking when we might think about starting a family, and me saying, maybe next year, or when things are more stable. "She went to a doctor," Mike continued. "Found out she has endometriosis. It makes it very difficult to conceive naturally. She would need fertility treatments, and she was too afraid to tell you because she thought you'd see it as another reason to delay having children." The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too hot. I needed air. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Mike looked down at his hands. "Because after everything fell apart, after our divorces, she had a complete breakdown. She's been in therapy for the past year, and she finally told me the whole truth about why she was so desperate to connect with someone who wanted the same things she did." "And you wanted children?" Before I continue, please pause the video and subscribe to the channel. I know that not everyone likes all videos, so I try to publish a variety of stories for different age groups and preferences so that no one is left out. I also read all your comments to better understand your preferences, so don't hesitate to write comments. It helps to improve the content. You can write, "I am 65 and I like nuclear revenge," or "pro-revenge where a woman cheats," or something else. I will be very grateful for that. Thank you in advance for your time. I will continue the story. I already had them. But I made her feel like her dreams were valid, like wanting a family wasn't asking too much. Mike looked up at me. "I'm not trying to excuse what we did. The affair was wrong, the lying was wrong, the way we handled everything was wrong. But I needed you to know that it wasn't just about sex or excitement." She felt like she was dying inside, watching years pass while her chance to be a mother slipped away. I sat in silence for a long time. This information changed nothing about what they had done, but it added a layer of complexity I hadn't known existed. "What happened to her after the divorce?" I asked, surprising myself. "She transferred to a hospital in California. Started fresh. She's in therapy working on herself. The endometriosis got worse, and doctors say her chances of conceiving naturally are basically zero now." "And you?" Mike's laugh was bitter. "I lost everything. My kids hate me. Susan remarried a good man who treats Emma and Jake like his own sons. I see them every other weekend, and they spend most of that time asking when they can go home." He paused, then continued. "I realized something in therapy too. I wasn't looking for love or excitement. I was looking for someone who made me feel like a hero instead of a failure. With Valerie I felt needed, wanted. At home I felt like I was constantly disappointing Susan and the kids. So you both used each other to fill holes in your lives." "Yeah. And in the process, we destroyed everything good we had." We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally Mike spoke again. "I'm telling you this because Valerie asked me to. Not so you'd forgive her or try to get back together. She knows that ship has sailed. But she wanted you to understand that her betrayal wasn't about you not being enough. It was about her feeling like she was running out of time to have the life she dreamed of." I thought about Rebecca, about our conversations about marriage and family. She was younger than me, had always been clear that she wanted children someday. We had talked about it openly, planned for it. It was so different from the silent hopes and fears that had apparently characterized my marriage to Valerie. How is she now? I asked. Better, I think. She's considering adoption. There's a program for single mothers that helps match them with children who need homes. She says maybe this is how she's meant to become a mother. I finished my coffee and stood up to leave. Mike, I appreciate you telling me this. It does help me understand some things. But it doesn't change what you both did to your families. I know. I'm not looking for forgiveness. I thought you deserved to know the whole story. As I drove back to Detroit, I thought about the 3 years Valerie had secretly hoped for a pregnancy that never came. I thought about all the times she had brought up the subject of children, and all the times I had deflected with talk of timing and financial stability. I wasn't ready to forgive her betrayal, but I could finally understand her desperation. When I got home, I found Rebecca cooking dinner in our kitchen. She looked up and smiled when I walked in. How was your mysterious meeting? She asked. I had told her I was meeting someone from my past but hadn't given details. Now I found myself telling her everything, about the affair, about the pepper in the condom, about what Mike had told me today. She listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions for clarification. Do you think you'll ever talk to Valerie directly? She asked when I finished. I don't know. Part of me wants to understand more about what she was going through. But another part of me thinks it's better to leave the past in the past. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. You know, it doesn't have to be about forgiveness or reconciliation. Sometimes understanding is enough. Sometimes knowing the whole story lets you finally close the book completely. 3 months later, I made another decision I thought I'd never make. I sent Valerie a letter. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs acknowledging what Mike had told me, expressing that I was sorry she had felt so alone in our marriage, and wishing her well in whatever path her life took next. I didn't expect a response and I didn't get one. But writing that letter felt like removing the last piece of anger I had been carrying around. 6 months after that, Rebecca and I got married. At our wedding, during my speech, I talked about the importance of open communication, of sharing dreams and fears with the person you love, of never assuming you know what your partner is thinking or feeling. I didn't mention Valerie or the lessons I had learned from the failure of my first marriage, but she was there in every word I spoke about the kind of husband I wanted to be this time. A year later, Rebecca and I started trying for our first child. We talked openly about our hopes, our fears, about what we would do if we faced fertility challenges. We made decisions together as partners. When our daughter Sarah was born, I held her in my arms and thought about all the paths that had led me to that moment. The betrayal, the anger, the investigation, the divorce, they had all been necessary steps on the journey to this new life. I never heard from Valerie again, but sometimes I wondered if she had found her path to motherhood through adoption. I hope she had. Everyone deserves the chance to love and be loved, even if they make terrible mistakes along the way. As I watched Sarah sleep in her crib, I realized that the story I thought was about revenge was actually about something else entirely. It was about the importance of truth, communication, and second chances. Not second chances with the same person. Some bridges really can't be rebuilt. But second chances at love, at family, at building the life you actually want instead of just accepting the one you ended up with. I know which kind of story I'd rather be living.